G'day guys, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to go through a little story that I've got, which is just happened recently around here, and I thought it was a good thing to bring up to everyone. And I suppose I'll start with saying, listen, it probably fits under the brackets of safety, but in saying that, I'm not really a safety guy. I prefer to do things safely. But once you put the brackets of safety in there, there's all sorts of stuff that hides in our modern world, which under the big umbrella of people making rules for everyone to, in some fashion, stop learning and just do as you're told. I much prefer to go down the world of common sense, logic and common sense, and we learn by what people do, which is a little bit of what I'm talking about here. And make sense of things. I say that when we all live in a world where common sense doesn't seem to be too common anymore. But anyway, I digress. What the story's about is a gentleman who was actually speaking to I was just speaking to a gunsmith who was just looking at a rifle that was brought him to have a look at, a brand new build that had come back where the muzzle brake had been had collapsed and nearly blown off the end of the rifle. What was the build? Listen, expensive, well-built rifle, good chassis, good barrel, good action, good everything. The muzzle brake on the front of it was a T3 Terminator, so a good muzzle brake made by a smart gentleman over in New Zealand. And nothing wrong with the muzzle brake, by the way. There is now, but the muzzle brake didn't cause any problems. But it came in where this had only fired 10 rounds on a build that had taken 2 years to get there, with all the quality spent on doing everything there, and it came back in with starting off with a muzzle brake failure. The gunsmith started to have a look at it. I was on the phone talking to him while he was actually looking at things, and his first concerns were that he had not clearanced it properly, not made sure the muzzle brake was the right size, was his first concerns. So his first thing was to get the right measure, the bit that wasn't damaged on, and make sure it was the right size. And yes, it was the right size, that wasn't a problem. He then had found the muzzle brake where you could actually see it was a threaded muzzle brake, and it had torn the muzzle brake almost all the way off, or it got halfway off the threads, actually by the amount of force at the end there. So a lot of force had gone into this situation and then collapsed the center section of the muzzle brake. Then he'd got the muzzle brake off, and while talking to me, found that when he looked at things, checking things, the last 1.5 to 2 inches of the barrel was larger. The bore was actually larger. He could get a 6.8mm cleaning rod to push down the end of the bore. So on a 6mm rifle, that shouldn't happen. It would only go down that last 1.5 to 2 inches of the bore. It was actually pushing down there that was swollen. In more talking, and we're sort of having a conversation while he's checking things, he put a straight edge on the outside of the barrel, and he could see the outside of the barrel was actually swollen. So this moved into, for both of us, we now have sort of my immediate thought, his immediate thought as well, was there's something went wrong and a bullet was left in the end of that rifle. And what had happened was there was a low charge in a round, would make sense of it. The bullet had got to where it was almost out. It was sitting there at 2 inches from the end of the barrel, and another round had fired at the back of it, and it had actually caused all this explosion down the back, up the end there. And that's, with more checking, he found some welded copper up there that proved that that's exactly what had happened. Now, in that moment, we're starting this conversation. That makes your hair stand up on the back of your neck, because if you know what's actually happening, you realise there was an enormous amount of force, and that was a very, very dangerous situation that gentleman had just been through. Some more of the conversation of what the gunsmith had with the owner of the rifle was what had actually happened, what was actually happening, what was going on with the rifle. The owner of the rifle, which was actually the parts of the ingredients that go into this conversation, was that this was his first ever precision rifle. A guy who was had done a lot of handgun stuff, a lot of handgun loading stuff, a lot of that sort of things. This is his first proper build in a precision rifle. And that's an important part of the story, which I'll come back to. But he had run 10 rounds. That was his 10th shot that had caused this to happen. And yes, you're wondering, did he get hurt? Yes, he got hurt. Not badly. He got sandpapered. He got shrapnel out of the explosion happening where stuff came back on, and he got little tiny bits and pieces of like I said, a good thorough sandblasting, and probably had to clean his pants. It would have been a fairly frightening moment, but he's okay. And to be truthful, it'll need a new barrel and a new muzzle brake, but the rifle will be okay. But really more the thought that goes to the likes of my head and anyone who knows this and understands what's happening here is that is almost a life-threatening situation that actually happened there. If that bullet stopped at a different place and that explosion had happened at the end of the action, and then that stuff is where fingers go missing, hands get damaged, eyes get damaged, faces get torn, all sorts of stuff, if you've actually got a full-blown explosion happening just in the barrel because you've actually fired one bullet into another bullet. But anyway, not too badly damaged. Sure, he won't do that again. I'm telling this story so that we all get to just reiterate and remember some basic safety rules, which I'm coming to. Like I said, be safe rules. Let's get a bit more into that story. What he was new at it, this is the first lot of rounds and things he did. There's obviously some stuff that happened wrong with what he's loading. And really that's the irrelevant part of the story. I'm sure he's going to go through and figure out what he did then. The bit that runs into the mistake, which none of us should make, and he did make, was that the round prior to that he fired, and whether this in hindsight that he's talking about this or he noticed it then, but certainly he said, listen, the round before felt a little bit different. The gunsmith said, listen, okay, did you run a rod through it at that stage? He said, no, I just fired another one. And this is what happened. So let's analyse a little bit of what actually happened there and make sense of why that probably happened. I don't know, I haven't had the conversation, I don't know the guy's name, I'm not, and this is not to pick on an individual by any means, this is for us all to learn, or remember, or reiterate, or basically due diligence and make sure you don't get too complacent is what this story's about. But what I would say is that he's no doubt knows the thing we all know, which is all should know, that if you do have something that happens wrong, if you don't see that bullet come out, if you don't know that bullet come out, for some reason or other you're not certain, you must stop and check. It could, in worst case scenarios, it could kill you at that time. Unlikely to kill you, more likely to do a lot of damage to you. In a handgun, obviously you got hand explosion, potentially it's going to do all sorts of horrible stuff. In a rifle, there's a little more protection out of what's going on, but because of the shape of them. But once you've got to that catastrophic failure of having a bullet up close or anywhere lodged in there and you're firing a high power round into it, it's a very dangerous situation. So stop and check. He didn't stop and check. Now, why didn't he stop and check? Listen, and that's, I suppose, the main crux of the story. He wouldn't have stopped and checked because I would suggest he was in completely unfamiliar territory while still doing a familiar thing. So he's firing a gun, he's no doubt run in and used lots of new firearms and discovered lots of loads and that sort of stuff. And the good thing of that is he knows more. The bad thing is complacency gets to the point it'll all be fine. Done it 1,000 times, it'll never go wrong. So there's that side of it that's running in all of us, and even very experienced people. There's that side of it where we forget to be scared of what we're actually doing and we start to soldier on. The other side of it is all of his experience from what it sounds like would have been with a handgun. When a handgun fires, there's no question, there's a lot more movement. Even in a .22 handgun, there's a lot more movement than there is in a rifle. So you take the handgun to rifle, but then you take and I don't know the weights of it, but the gunsmith certainly went to the levels of good heavy barrel, good MPA chassis, good bits and pieces. I won't go through any more of the details, but probably a 18-pound rifle with a T3 Terminator muzzle brake on it. So for those who don't know, the T3, the Terminator brakes, are very effective brakes. That's what Greg does his work around. They're very nicely machined, but they are very effective brakes. You do 18-pound rifle, approximately, the Terminator brake on the front of it, shooting in a prone position for someone that's used to shooting handguns in a 6mm Creedmoor, so probably running off the 90 grain bullets down the end of it, so that sort of weight bullet, it would have almost not recoiled, been very low on its recoil, especially for someone who's used to using a handgun. So there wasn't proper warning signs, and it would have definitely been fish out of water sort of stuff in the way of the feeling of things, and enough to not consider the implications of it. So what I'm really trying to say is that I can get the fact that he got a little bit baffled or a little bit fooled by a completely different format, but my comment would be, don't get complacent. For how easy and safe a bolt action rifle is, you can still do bad things. You can still hurt yourself. You can still do the wrong thing with that rifle. And there's things that we should always remember. I'm going to say them out loud now, which are the simple things of if it goes click in any form, if a firearm goes click, you wait before, so when I say click and it doesn't fire, you wait before you lift that bolt. You wait. 10 seconds is the normal sort of standard. I'd probably go to 20 seconds. But what can happen, for those who don't know and for those that have forgotten, is that you can have a primer that is a slow burn. So it's hit and it's actually happening. And it's actually happening and it'll take a while and then it goes bang. If you've got that in your hand when it goes bang, that's not going to be good. Not going to be good for you in any shape, form, fashion. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to touch it. You want to leave the bolt closed and you just want to wait. There's other things that happen in that click form as well. You'll get sometimes when you'll fire, the mechanism in your trigger actually has fired, but your firing pin is hung up and it can actually wait to actually fire. So once you've lifted the bolt, that problem's stopped. But if you've gone click, and especially in offhand situation or handgun situation, you've gone click and then you start wandering that muzzle around, potentially that gun's going to go bang when it's not pointing where it should be. Obviously, the rule of keeping that muzzle always pointing downrange, always pointing at your target, that sort of stuff is fixes that sort of thing. But these are the type of things that, and we've all seen it. If you haven't seen it, then you haven't been looking, where people do something or other and then they go to look at their firearm and they turn around and they look at things because it didn't go bang. That's a situation on a hung trigger, that sort of stuff, super dangerous. So if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, wait, stop and think about it. And of course, then there's the side of things where this happened, where it went bang and he didn't know what had happened. I was relaying this story to another person and he said, listen, I've had a suppressor completely fail on me in similar circumstances. Just 5 shots, and he shot 4 shots, I presume 100 yards, because he said the 4th shot was like an inch off where it should be. And I thought, oh, I must have messed up, must have been me. And I presume we're talking about a proper little, 1/4-inch group type thing at 100 yards, and then it was an inch off, and he thought, oh, it must have been me. The next shot, the can exploded on the end of the rifle. It tore it right to pieces, exploded at bullet exited halfway out the side, that sort of stuff, made a big mess of everything. Didn't hurt him, but it did destroy the barrel and did destroy the suppressor. When he tore it down to analyse what was going on, obviously the inner baffles had been coming loose. The first baffle in the first chamber must have worked loose, and it must have just tagged to make that bullet go off at an inch for that shot. If he'd not fired it again, he could have put it back together. Because he did fire it again, a few $100 went missing, because then it all basically that had tagged, it was in the road. Then once it tags the baffle properly, bullet goes sideways, it tears things to pieces, tries to pull it off the end, damage the barrel, all sorts of stuff. Probably a harder one to pick up, but realistically, in any form, if the bullet doesn't do what it's supposed to do, it's probably time to check. So, listen, that's my story. My real point is to come in and say that, listen, that guy's okay. This is a story you've probably all heard in various forms down the track. And in truth, it's where I feel the best way to learn in our world, that safety rules which just tell people to do things because this could happen and you should always do this and all that sort of stuff. I get it, I understand it. I much prefer the world which I come from, which I grew up in, where we hear the stories of it going wrong for people and we learn from that. And we learn and we get to be frightened about bits and pieces and understand how bad things can be. And we make our own decisions of how to be safe about this sort of stuff because of that story, which I get. That's where safety comes from. But like I said, once we got all the high vis on and the glasses and the helmets and we all live in plastic bubbles, then no one's learning anything anymore. We're just doing as we're told. I'd much rather make safe decisions out of information I've learned. That's what I pass on to you. Anyway, guys, thanks very much for checking in on us. I hope that story is of some worth to everybody, and catch you next time.